This video is an in-depth mission debriefing of the previous video on this channel, which was my personal ISE DPS record. Thus, this video is no guide to achieve the highest DPS possible, as there are already much higher DPS records around. Rather, it is a detailed analysis of this specific run, explaining what went great and what was not so good, and why the numbers are as they are. Before that, I will explain the actual build, which is a full science EPG build. As most of the current, that means summer 2020, DPS-centered science build, this build is based on using the spore-infused anomalies starship trait. This makes this setup very similar to the guide recently published by Hellspawny with the help of AJ on the DPS League's website for science ships, which I will link in the description below. And because of this similarity, I don't want to go into every detail, but I rather want to focus on the differences and deviations. On this build, we have 5 space anomalies, namely subspace vortex, chronometric inversion field, timeline collapse, very cold in space, and gravity well. Those abilities are already pretty strong by themselves, but by adding the spore-infused anomalies, we have a secondary effect to all of them, and let's have a detailed look at what makes this ability so popular and so effective by having a look at a short clip from another video on this channel. So what do we see here? Spore-infused anomaly in action. So actually only myself, only I'm in the proximity to this position. We see everyone else is around 40 kilometers away. So everything that we see is caused by myself. And we have now, how many spore-infused anomaly circles do we have? Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So how is this even possible? We only have 5 anomalies on board, but since we have the aftershock gravity well, and we can also see that there are some gravity wells around, we have even more spore-infused anomalies effects. And keep in mind that we cause this effect to happen every time we activate a science ability. So back to the build. So what's different in this build compared to the DPS League's proposal? First, a little bit of history. In the past, most science builds were purely based on achieving very, very high EPG numbers. That meant that you would use the deflector that would give you the highest bonus for EPG, and especially you would use all your 5 science consoles with EPG boosting consoles instead of only a few like I do here. So this causes my EPG score to be relatively mediocre compared to earlier days, where some people claimed that as a science captain you should have at least 400, maybe even 500 EPG in your science build. So there are two main reasons why the guide on the DPS League deviate or was able to deviate from this long-term established strategy. First, it became possible even for science captains to really push your critical chance and critical severity. And secondly, damaging clicky consoles, very powerful damaging clicky consoles, became available by means of Logbox and Zenstore chips. And the ability provided by those clicky consoles might be so strong that the damage done by those consoles is actually higher than the reduction of damage you do by your bridge officer abilities when you reduce your EPG value. So, as you might have guessed, looking at the setup, this build tries to walk the middle line between those two philosophies. I don't have that many damaging clicky consoles, but still I'm not boosting my EPG value as much as possible. I'm not going fully to the crit chance and crit severity side by not using the morphogenic armament set. Instead, I use the 2-piece Martok set to have a constant boost to critical chance. And this is probably the most important difference. I use the Domino console from the Bajoran Pilot Escort. And basically, this build here is centered around this idea that Domino reduces cooldowns on your bridge officer abilities. We also have 46 of 47 duty officer that reduces your temporal bridge officer abilities when using science bridge officers and vice versa. We do have the temporal vortex consoles, which even further reduces the cooldowns on temporal bridge officer abilities. And we have the improved the photonic officer with the improved photonic officer starship trait. So that's a lot of cooldown reduction, but especially in combination with the unconventional systems space trait, this causes a very nice feedback loop, because using any control bridge officer ability, unconventional systems cause your universal console cooldowns to be reduced. The control bridge officer abilities used on this build are chronometric inversion field, timeline collapse, and gravity well. So using those will actually reduce the cooldown of Domino, and using Domino will actually reduce the cooldown of the bridge officers. And why Domino in this case really has an edge over the dynamic power redistributor or redistribution module, which is widely regarded as the best console in the game, or one of the best consoles in the game, is the dynamic power redistributor module cannot be activated while it's active. And that's different for Domino. The dynamic power redistributor is blocked for the 30 seconds it is active, and thus during this time its cooldown cannot be reduced by unconventional systems. But Domino is its own cooldown immediately starts after activation, and thus the cooldown can immediately be reduced by the unconventional space systems space trade. So this is what we want to see in the video, where we want to go now. So I have put together this screen setup where we have the graphs of the combat log reader and SCM together with the video. We will also see the line progress through the graph as the video progresses. And here in the upper right corner, we have the damage graph of every teammate. So I am Churchland, so everything that's green in this graph is my own damage. In the lower right corner, we have just my own abilities. So basically everything that was green in the above graph is now broken down to my own abilities. Unfortunately, in this graph, we cannot really identify the effect of spore-infused anomalies. First of all, because S is too much at the end of the alphabet, so that we don't see its color here. And another reason is that most of the spore-infused anomalies are calculated as being your personal pet damage, and thus we don't really see it as one color here. What we do see is already that the pink color here is a delayed overload cascade, that we have very high spikes, 1, 2, and 3 here, or maybe 4. This is a delayed overload cascade. You can also count this one, and this will be interesting during the video. And in the lower left, we have the average DPS value. Now this is a plot by SCM, and of course those values are what everyone is going for. And at the end of the video we will also see the explanation why my line finishes much earlier than all the other lines. So let's jump into the video. No. Two more things to mention in this video. First of all, we have two very interesting teammates here. Markus, or Rheinweier as his handle is of course one of the very best STO players. And now here he uses a ship that is already called DPS record provider. And obviously with this run he just did that for me. So mainly by debuffing the enemies, but also by, for example, by using concentrate firepower, also helping me with my own DPS. Also very interesting is that we have Akira in the team, also another very, very good player. And if you go to the original video on this channel and there you follow the link to the Hilbert score DPS statistics, and then you go to his own, there you will see that Akira uses a setup very close to the guide from the DPS League. I know that in many runs I have together with him, he will perform better than I do. But in this run, he didn't. And this kind of reflects my skepticism about the damaging clicky console approach, namely that it's very hard to perform consistently with it because you have to click a lot and you have to time very good, and then again you have to get the shot. And I totally admit that what was so good in this run is that I got most of the very, very nice shots, especially with the delayed overload cascade. So what will happen now is, of course, everyone will buff up until the timer runs out. So that means launching the Kobayashi Maru. In my case, activating emergency power to auxiliary, where we have another starship trait that it's boosting that. The improved photonic officer, my captain abilities, and the dynamic power redistributor. And important, the domino console should be the very, very last, because its duration will be prolonged by a kill, while its pure duration is very short. So we have to take care of being able to kill an enemy during its activation. So let's see how this worked. So now we are approaching the very first very high spike. So we see some nice numbers around here. Unfortunately, we don't see much else, but we see that we have just activated the delayed overload cascade. And of course, because it's delayed, we see the damage spike only shortly after. But we also see that we are fully buffed. So everything that's good, almost everything is being activated. And in this state, we activated the delayed overload cascade, and of course this caused this very huge spike, which we will not see again during this run. What will also happen is that shortly I will activate the auxiliary warp core ejection console to get to the left side. Sometimes it happens that I overshoot using this ability, but now here it was just right. Just arrived at the transformer. So unfortunately, still most of the abilities are on cooldown. So I will activate everything that's left here. Especially Photonic Fleet and my swarmers. We do see indeed that timeline collapse is already active again due to the immense cooldown reduction, as well as the delayed overload cascade. Actually, the swarmers work pretty well. We will see that average damage is not too bad. And now, mistake and something very good almost together. First of all, I kind of lost my orientation here and I'm flying into the wrong direction. But my delayed overload cascade is almost ready again. And since the spheres in the middle that have just been spawned by destroying the first transformer are still kept in the gravity well from the beginning, because we have the improved gravity well, we can use the delayed overload cascade on them. You see the spore-infused anomalies also having full effect from this gravity well. You also saw a small mistake here. I changed target quickly. But again, now we have some space anomalies that we can put on the transformer, especially timeline collapse here. So this is very difficult because timeline collapse also draws the enemy, and we have to take care that the nanite spheres and nanite probes from the gate are not drawn here. This sometimes happens if the gravity well has expired. If the gravity well is still there, of course, we are good, because its pull is much stronger than of timeline collapse. But again, because we can use the timeline collapse, we concentrate the enemies in this situation again to do nice damage as Psi again. So this worked very nice here. So that's what we are doing here, and very nice. So even my average run. So now last phase, second to last phase, going to the gate and concentrating on the gate. We see that just the cooldown of the gravity well has expired, and I can put it on the gateway. And this again, in combination with having delayed overload cascade ready again, is what worked perfectly here. Usually this doesn't work. Usually someone, another science captain in the team, directly activates the delayed overload cascade while the spheres are still in front of the gate, which is also a very nice hit. But if you are able to activate the gravity well on the gateway, wait for a second till all the spheres and probes are here, and then activating it, that's the best that can happen here. So that was this part. now last part, taking on the tech. Of course, this does take a while, but still there's some damage we can do on this part. We are standing right in the middle of the shield bubble, which is protecting us, but we also have basically two tanks in the team, Bullet and Marcus, so that's the main reason why we as a science are not in danger right now, which we would be if there are no teammates drawing the aggression of the enemy. So now, what happens? The cube is dead, but the mission is not over. The reason for that is that another cube survived, and I didn't realize, so someone else had to fly there and kill the cube, and that is the reason why I don't do damage here anymore, while my teammates do. Actually, that's not too bad for the statistics, which is usually calculated by using your own red alert time, and thus the average DPS value doesn't go down because red alert stops. So that's the analysis of this run.